name's Monica Haller. I'm from the United States. Well, let's see. In the past, I came in 2014. The summer of 2014 is when I started. And so I came a few months after they decided to move in here into the workshop, to move the studio and workshop here. So I joined those efforts to kind of build the workshop, to build a space that could be, multi-use of, all the things that we were conceiving at that point was like metalwork and woodwork and kind of a place for visual and critical studies and these sorts of areas where people could work together in the workshop. And then we also were doing all sorts of other experiments around living and eating and in more self-sufficiency around, we had to bring all in our water, and we built an outdoor kitchen. So it was kind of like thinking about living in thoughtful ways of all kinds, and of course thinking specifically about the history of where we were too, what's underneath us, the layers of what's underneath us, and the layers we might want to be building. I think that when Sebastian was inviting and drawing, telling me about it was one of the things that was especially interesting to me. At that time, I was working a lot with soil and the history underneath our feet wherever we stand, right, which of course changes pretty radically, and the human ideologies that live in that ground. So it was a very natural connection for me to be coming here. Okay, yeah, so Sebastian and I from 2015 until 2017 lived here during the seasons I just talked about, during the spring, summer, fall months on and off. And we had Sebastian had bought the bus right before I got here, so we lived in the bus. We built the first summer, along with efforts of others like Nico Jungel and Johanna Belzar and like a bunch of people. We built an outdoor kitchen immediately. That was the first year when we built the tree house. So again, it was this kind of hybrid combination of trying to build and think about a workshop where multiple things could be happening at once. It would be multiple use, and people would be working together. People who already do collaborative projects, right? So that not totally unlike other atelier models, but also thinking about like basically living in together too, of course. And I had before spent time trying different ways of living in different configurations with other people or community, and other people had done the same. So this was, I guess, another way of doing that. I think in different ways from Sebastian, had been done a lot with farming and gardening, and he was really interested, and others were interested in what it would look like to be living off of the main power grid, and it's kind of an opportunity to do all sorts of like design and experiments in that way. So it was really a combination of both, or is rather. It's not. I'm less involved now in that way. I'm not living here anymore. But yeah, it was really a combination of art and life are not separate, of course, and so it was like seeing what that looked like all together. What else were we doing? I mean, now actually, not in the last years, I took a teaching job in the U.S., and so there was some time where we were kind of spanning. There are already a lot of collaborations between institutions, Berlin institutions, and my university in the U.S., the University of Minnesota. And so we continued that, and we still are. Students from the university have come here several times to explore, to think about other projects. There's a art residency program in the city of Berlin that the university students go to, and they always come up here when they're. So there's, I think it just, we have established that connection. So a lot of times, rather than, because of the nature of how things have worked at Teufelsberg, it's made a lot of sense for those connections to happen in a one-to-one basis or a small group basis rather than like an institutional connection, right? Because there's so many different projects and so many things happening here, to try and establish some institute that here, it makes more sense to work with small groups and one-on-one. So university students come here one-on-one or small groups to look around or to talk or see if there's sort of some kind of creative action or some kind of thing that they want to do, just like a lot of people in Berlin do. Now the students in the university do that too. I mean, what else was I going to say about that? I think it could be more regimented, but I think it's like learning. I feel like over the years, I have, like other people, continued to learn what is happening here, what's possible, what's the best way to work with the structure and system that's already in place here. So I feel like that way of working in small groups or one-on-one came out of what seemed to be most possible given the systems and the structure that's working on the mountain. Well, before I say that, I say one more thing about the small groups and the people. I mean, it's not unlike the workshops that, Sebastian has been doing with others too, right? Whether it's other universities that come in and do a week workshop or a 10-day workshop, or some professor that's bringing a small group of people, or some individual, some group of people that aren't, of course, associated with institutions, that not necessarily. But I think this, that the groups now, the students that come from the US, it's a kind of in a similar spirit, I guess. And so what do I think is could be the direction of Teufelsberg? You want to come join me? And without going too much into the details of all that history, because it's hard to talk about now without talking about, what exactly was happening in 2014, but it seems to me one thing that's evolved or changed is that there's of course more organizational structure around the tours. There's now, there's all sorts of kind of tour-oriented things that exist now that didn't exist before, from the kitchen garden to the sitting areas, to even now, we were just the other day walking by and Sebastian was showing me this sign that has these questions that people ask all the time, right? What are some of the questions? Yeah. What are some of the questions? Do you live here? No. Do you, these, what else?
Yeah, these questions didn't change over the years.
But the thing is we were just joking, but it's those questions didn't change, but just the fact that many, many people now know that people ask them all the time, and that we were just we should have made this years ago. It would be so simple. But my point is that I would say, what it feels to me kind of from the outside now, because I haven't been around as much this last year as years prior, but it seems like a lot of the tourist-oriented aspects have organized in a particular direction. There are exhibition spaces that look quite different than they did before. Well, I have the feel. Okay, I don't have as much information anymore as I used to. I could talk to you about what I thought was evolving the previous few years, from maybe 2014 to 2016 or something. Mm-hmm. So that's my preface to what I'm about to say. But I have the feeling that more of the things that have been developed are for people who come in but aren't here all the time, right? So the exhibition space or the tourist space. But I don't have the feeling as much the things that we organized the first year around the community kitchen. Maybe it's that a lot of that infrastructure exists now, and so it doesn't need as much work as before, but I have the feeling that there's less internal organization between the people who are here, really invested here, and more organization for the people who are outside.
When we started, we actually were trying to grow a community up here, because there's a huge potential. Yeah. And I think the mountain is so diverse and has so many aspects that you can have multiple groups, working together and developing the mountain. Yeah. And of course they can be, it needs to be structured, and but our intention was to grow that part which brings people together, to make it pizza ovens on a tree house, and have people, come together and eat, and have a kitchen outside, and a place to meet, and then there was a lot of investing in that idea, which was habitable up here at the beginning, and then it became more difficult. Today it's still there, but
I mean, you probably have lots of examples of this, but I think of one a few years in was this. So Sebastian and several others had built these compost toilets, right?
Yeah, they still function.
Yeah, and we
since 4 years.
and they would fill. So this is like
now.
to me where the kind of always inevitably it's like it's living, it's artistic, it's you don't separate these things, but. They were used by everyone, and people would have a party here and use them. They have to be like they're filled with shit very quickly, right? And so there's like always someone sweeping up or making room for an artist or a person to do their work, like inevitably, like the janitor at the place where you like work and live, or so
it's to stay. So this is like a free room, but you have to work and install the equipment to make it work, and to make it community work, you need infrastructure.
So there was a certain point where people would come in and out very quickly, very quickly on a regular basis.
And also to host people,
right?
To be able to like have people and co-work and join in. But then this infrastructure is also. That's what this workshop is also about. Yeah. The Autonomous System Laboratory is about community research about technologies which enable communities to be off-grid and at such locations. I have friends coming and collaborating on diverse projects, which are not all related to autonomy yet, but this is like the intention of building this place that, it's a place for co-creation, but it hasn't, as an artist, I'm only part of it. So it's like a project which I support and build here, but which is meant to facilitate work around these.
Is it fair to say that it's a laboratory, and you're, let's say, a continual base or ongoing organizer, but people would come in and out of it?
Yeah, but the idea is really. There's not a place for painting in per se, because it doesn't provide this infrastructure. It's like a workshop. We have tools and you share tools, and there's like all kind of like organizational ideas and sharing principles applied.
What I wanted to say though, as the example about the composts, was. Like, we kind of lost it a little bit, but it was how, like Sebastian, like I was saying and Sebastian was saying too, all of the actions require all these particular works to make them happen, right? Like all of the infrastructure, and that's always the case everywhere, but it's in some ways could be, or should be transparent everywhere, but for sure we have the opportunity to make that kind of labor transparent here. And so, like I was saying, Leo and Sebastian built these compost toilets. They were getting filled rather quickly because of all of the actions here, and of course people coming in to like have parties or to spray. And we wanted to make that the labor that went into that visible, right? And so one time, because the compost toilets, the compost, like the shit needs to be cleaned out. It needs to be taken out and put in a specific
solar composter
place, the solar composter, to decompose.
Which is a whole technology in itself.
Exactly.
So we wanted to make this process visible.
That's right.
And we had a friend,
Evie Phillip,
who was playing music here before and mixing. And she made a mix about shit.
She came to DJ and play and support the work of moving the shit.
Yeah.
Right? So it was a way to make, we filmed it, and she was there, she set up her whole table and basically serenaded us as we moved the shit. And then we documented it. So this is a piece, right? It is the like action and the labor of taking the shit out of the toilet, and
it's some part of like communal living together, which is usually not seen or happens
seen.
in the
and
back.
it's a part of art,
and nobody wants to do it.
Any art action that is not seen or named, but someone's always doing it so that an artist can do their work, right? And usually that someone isn't Sebastian or I, but in here on the mountain it is. And so goes back. I mean, I was using this to illustrate, or as an example of what Sebastian was saying, that these are actions, but they're also always a performance in a way too. And sometimes that performance is named more overtly, like in this case, and sometimes it's quiet. It's a lot quieter. The kind of the performance, the ongoing action and performance. We'll let you know. Also, the funny thing about what was happening is we didn't plan it this way, but the same time we had planned to move the shit, there was a party like next door, literally, where they were roasting a lamb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it a lamb? Not a
no,
lamb.
and then also
no,
tourists passing by. You know, this is like.
So simultaneously, the shit was being moved, and
Yeah.
there was the party with the lamb.
That's what I mean. Is like with the Anthropocene's theater up here. You know, it's like this ongoing. Like, if you make this process of what you're doing here and how you're transforming the place and contributing to it, or like restoring, you know, it's like all these actions become part of the performance because you have these tourists passing by all the time, observing what are you doing and what is that. And I mean, most tourists come, wander around, and they. That really changed over the years. At the very beginning, there were like tour guides who were doing a performance themselves, telling all kind of information and stories, and to the tourist groups, which would go as a group together and wander around for an hour on this station, and would have a guide who tells whatever to them, and they were totally, you know, sometimes disoriented, and it was an experience for them to see all these things going on and making sense of it pretty much by themselves. And right now, you know, they get told the true story, and you know, the facts are reviewed and so on and so on and so on, but it also misses this absurd quality it had at that time, that it would entertain people because it was absurd, and it was like up to them to be creative, to see and figure it out and ask questions. So they would also like more demand, you know, it's like, but now tell us, what is this, you know? And then he would say like, okay, it was a spy station. And then
you have to be more proactive to get your own.
Well, if you tell, I guess if you tell tourists, you know, all this information, it's just like going in and then okay, it's all true, but it's not challenging. And that was a certain quality here, which made it fun also in the beginning years, because it left these opportunities open for people to become active and figure it out or get involved.
I mean, to me, like, actually the way I think about it right now, because now I'm not here as much as I used to be, so more changes between, right? Like, I see it a little bit more changes between visits. So one thing that feels quite absurd that is felt, and it's a very different kind of absurdity than before, but it feels absurd that one would try to make a similar kind of tourist destination to other, like would try to replicate other tourist destinations or other ways of working, like a beer garden in this way, or that is a kind of absurdity to me, to use the same model for here. Like, it actually, why not learn from this place for it to be its own model, you know? So actually that's a really new kind of absurdity that I've seen developing in the last maybe. Well, I'd like to see, I mean, I think absurdity is an amazing thing to use. I think it's a wonderful, critical thing to use. So in this way, I'm using it in a kind of different light. But I think it would be, it has so much, because of where it stands and what's underneath it, and for all sorts of reasons, it has such amazing potential to be, it's like, have all the projects exist up here, and have it talked about really thoughtfully and critically, and like let them connect and let them be separate, and contextualize it in a larger narrative of like urban centers or the narrative of this city in a really critical way, like really, but there's so much room for like thinking and conversation between people up here and between what other people are doing in the cities that's maybe much less commercial And I think that would be, I would really love to see more of that happen. And the people who've been working here for a long time, for their, even though it's not economic value, let's say, well, it is in some ways, actually, it's quite economic value, a ton. But I would love to see those kinds of actions that have happened for a long time be understood for their worth by the people who are organizing the whole mountain.